Welcome to Sky News Breakfast. In a major unveiling of what our future with coronavirus may look like, the government has announced plans for COVID passports to allow people to attend sports matches, nightclubs, theatres and other events. The system being developed will consider three factors: vaccination, a recent negative test, or natural immunity, having tested positive for the virus in the previous 6 months. Pilots for the certificates launch in just over a week's time, with a nightclub in Liverpool and football matches at Wembley amongst the first to get the go-ahead. The Prime Minister has also announced a traffic light system for international travel in a bid to restart foreign holidays. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, reports.
Football's coming home. Gradually. This is how it used to be, fans streaming along Wembley Way on their way to an England international in 2019. Now 3 showpiece domestic games at Wembley, the semi-final and the final of the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup final, will be among 9 vaccine passport trials, with fans allowed back in the stadium in April and May. The government says it's developing a system for COVID status certification. The idea is to manage risks where large numbers of people are in close proximity. Not in pubs or restaurants at this stage, but at sports events and festivals, or in theatres and nightclubs. At this large nightclub in London, before lockdown, it could accommodate up to 1,400 revellers. But the manager fears vaccine passports could be another burden on an industry already on the brink.
If they're going to start cutting capacities, if they're going to start letting less people in, or we're going to slow queues down from coming into venues, it's just going to have an adverse effect. It's just going to, delay the inevitable. And eventually, venues will run out. They'll be strapped for cash. They won't be able to operate because the restrictions are just going to be too heavy on venues.
The Cabinet Office Minister, Michael Gove, says the government is studying a green pass system used in Israel, which allows people who've been vaccinated, recently recovered from COVID, or have had a negative test to congregate in theatres and nightclubs. But there's strong opposition to vaccine passports from many MPs. This weekend, a cross-party group of 72 MPs signed a pledge opposing the scheme, claiming it's divisive and discriminatory. If the plan does require legislation, the government may try to win over the rebels by promising it'll only be temporary, perhaps for no more than a year. Besides vaccine passports, Boris Johnson will tomorrow also announce new plans for international travel this summer. Travellers will face a traffic light system. People returning from a green light country will not have to self-isolate, but will need to provide a negative test before departure and after arrival. Those returning from an amber country must self-isolate at home, while anyone returning from a red light country will have to complete quarantine in a hotel and bear the cost. Summer holidays to Europe will depend, of course, on vaccination levels on the continent improving and infection rates falling. John Craig, Sky News.
Our political correspondent Rob Powell joins me now from Westminster. Rob, how is all of this likely to go down with MPs and, most importantly, businesses?
So I think, Gillian, there's probably a fair amount in there that will reassure. I think the fact that the government has said that travel, transport and shops will not be subject to this COVID passporting scheme. No mention of pubs and restaurants being involved for now anyway. I think that was one of the main concerns that MPs had, that they'd be checking certificates and passports to get into more everyday settings. That's not to say there won't be concerns, though. Michael Gove in the papers today says that this COVID passporting scheme is all about helping business, about getting places open without social distancing to allow them to make more money in the short term. But we've already heard from the manager of the Liverpool Comedy Club that's due to have pretty much the first pilot of this COVID passporting scheme. And he said he'd signed up to test people on the way in and the way out and didn't know that there was anything to do with vaccination certificates in this scheme. And he's already had people phone up and try and cancel because they are uncomfortable with the idea of having to show they've had the jab. We know others in hospitality are worried about the extra staff that may be needed to do checks like this. I think there will be concern about how long schemes like this go on for, whether they are going to be strictly temporary or whether they drift into something more permanent. On international travel and this traffic light scheme that's been unveiled, I think that framework will be broadly welcomed by the travel and tourism industry. It is what they have been calling for. But of course, the detail is crucial in this, specifically what countries go into each section and what dates the government will be operating off. We know May the 17th is the earliest date that they've got down for leisure travel, non-essential travel to start. That date still hasn't been confirmed yet. And I think the industry will be probably quite frustrated that the government is still telling people not to book summer holidays, given that many operators will have refund schemes, cancellation schemes, flexible rebooking policies as well. Don't forget as well that this is all being negotiated and talked about with the devolved governments in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and we have seen those administrations go in a different direction if they're uncomfortable with what's being proposed here in Westminster.
Rob, thank you. Well, let's get the latest now on the COVID figures for the UK. 3,423 new COVID-19 cases have been reported, with 10 more deaths. That takes the total number of people who've died within 28 days of testing positive to 126,826. The figures also show that 31.4 million first doses of a vaccine have now been given. Police and politicians in Northern Ireland have appealed for calm following a second night of violence around Belfast. Petrol bombs were thrown in Sandy Row, while 3 cars in Newton Abbey were hijacked and set on fire. It comes after 8 people were arrested and 27 police officers were injured during riots on Friday. Police and protesters have clashed at Kill the Bill protests in London over the police crime and sentencing bill. 26 people were arrested in the capital and 10 officers suffered injuries amid a day of largely peaceful demonstrations across the country. Around 1,000 people gathered in Bristol, and further events were held in Liverpool, Manchester and Birmingham. Former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn spoke at the gathering in central London, saying the proposed legislation is a very dangerous, slippery slope to inhibiting the right to protest. Jordanian authorities have denied reports that Prince Hamza, Jordan's former crown prince and the half-brother of King Abdullah, have been arrested for attempting a coup. They say he's been told to stop destabilising activities that are targeting Jordan's security, following the arrests of at least 2 former senior palace officials. US rapper DMX is in hospital in New York following a heart attack. His lawyer confirmed that the musician, whose real name is Earl Simmons, had come off life support, but said he was still concerned about the star's condition. Musicians including Missy Elliott and Eminem have been wishing him well online. Let's return to our top story now. The government announcing plans to introduce a traffic light system for international travel. The move will see quarantine measures dropped for green light destinations, which could provide a boost to the UK travel industry. Well, joining me now is Dan Pearce, the Chief Executive of the Travel Trade Gazette. Good morning to you. What's your view of this traffic light system? Is it workable in your view?
Good morning, Gillian. Yeah, I think the message from the travel industry is that it broadly welcomes this announcement, although, of course, it's not an announcement yet, of a traffic light system. There's been a huge amount of frustration around all the speculation that's come, sometimes from the mouths of government ministers around whether you can or you can't travel this summer. I think what the industry really wants and craves at the moment is some certainty that would enable consumers to book travel with confidence, and of course for the industry to get their planning in place for a summer season, which really doesn't happen overnight.
And as we understand it, with this traffic light system, those on green, it would mean that you wouldn't have to isolate if travelling to those countries. Is that how you understand it?
Yeah, that's right. There'd be a green, an amber, and a red list. The red list is already effectively in place, and I'm sure everyone's heard about the quarantine hotels, of which a number of countries suddenly, I think it's about 35 currently. If you travel to those countries, you have to go into a quarantine hotel. On the other hand, under the green light with this proposed traffic light system, people will be able to travel freely to certain countries. However, they will require a test within 72 hours of departure and 2 tests in the days following their return. But that is a big step forward after a lot of speculation that there wouldn't be any international travel at all this year.
How confident are you that international travel will resume on May the 17th?
There's an increasing confidence around the travel industry. And one of the key reasons for that is the travel industry is now being fully consulted in the government's plans. So there was a lot of frustration last year. The government announced a global travel task force in the autumn of 2020, and yet no member, no representative from the travel industry sat on that task force. And I think there was a bit of a gap in understanding about what was going on in the industry. I mean, and due to some really great lobbying work that's gone on across the industry, there are now many members from travel, senior representatives being included in consultation. And I think all eyes really are on the conclusions of the Global Travel Task Force, which is due out not tomorrow, but next week, I think around April the 12th. And yet we do know, and we know this from the Prime Minister's own mouth, that there are going to be some aspects of this trailed this week.
And you've launched this Save Travel campaign. What exactly are you calling for in that? What are the elements that are vital to ensure that the travel industry is able to get back on its feet?
One of the key aspects here is that the travel industry has not had an ounce of sector-specific support since the beginning of the crisis. Now, this is an industry that's really had a double whammy. In many ways, obviously, business has stopped and come to a halt, which it did, as it did for most industries last year. But this is also an industry that has had to pay back nearly all of the business that it did in the months preceding the crisis. So it's had it on both sides, and a huge cash crunch in the industry, which has been absolutely devastating for travel. So yeah, TTG launched the Save Travel campaign, which raised these issues in Parliament, and I really do hope that that's had an effect, and that's one of many reasons in which travel is now being fully consulted.
The government advice at present is still not to book a summer holiday. What would you say to people who are undecided as to whether they should book? Should they?
Well, I'd say something very clear around this, and it's easy to mistake that advice, booking travel, can I actually travel? It's not illegal to book a holiday. It's very legal to book a holiday. And the best advice to offer anybody watching is to talk to a travel professional. There is an army of travel agents out there, experts in travel, experts just as much as accountants are experts in finance, lawyers are experts in legal aspects. Talk to a travel professional, and they will help you book that summer holiday or beyond into 2022. But that holiday that will give you something to look forward to as we emerge from the coronavirus crisis.
OK, Dan Pearce, Chief Executive of the Travel Trade Gazette, thank you very much for speaking to us and for the advice.
Thanks.
Nicola Sturgeon says Scotland's controversial not proven verdict in the court should be looked at. Scotland is the only part of the UK where juries can return 3 verdicts at the end of a trial: guilty, not guilty or not proven. Rape Crisis Scotland want the verdict scrapped amid what the First Minister called shamefully low conviction rates for rape and sexual assault. A state of emergency has been declared in Florida following a significant leak at a wastewater storage pond containing radioactive material at an old phosphate mine. It's feared the walls are about to be breached, flooding the area. Local residents have been evacuated and a highway has been closed as a precaution. The Duke of Cambridge has urged people to fight climate change and take the lead from young people who are looking for solutions. In a video message played at a gala for US-based charity Conservation International, Prince William said the next decade would be one of our greatest ever tests.
If we do not act decisively in the next 10 years, we will cause irreversible damage to our planet. This damage will not be felt equally by everyone. It is the most vulnerable, those with the fewest resources, and those who have done the least to cause climate change, who will continue to be impacted the most. All of us, across all sectors of society and in every corner of the globe, must come together to fundamentally reset our relationship with nature.
The Education Secretary has said that investing in the next generation of teachers is crucial to long-term recovery. Gavin Williamson says the single most important factor in schooling is the quality of the teacher. His comments come as the General Secretary of the Teachers' Union has criticised the government's handling of the pandemic, saying ministers treated teachers with contempt by not rewarding their efforts with a pay rise. Egypt has held a parade to celebrate moving 22 of its mummies from the Egyptian Museum in Cairo's Tahrir Square to a new museum elsewhere in the capital. The mummies, 18 kings and 4 queens, were each transported by road in their own capsule filled with nitrogen to provide protection. Christians around the world have been marking Easter Sunday as the Pope urged people not to lose hope in the dark months of the pandemic. Pope Francis said he hoped that people would rediscover the grace of everyday life at a scaled-back Easter vigil last night. Only 200 masked faithful were allowed to attend the service in St. Peter's Basilica. Catholics in Sri Lanka have attended church services to mark Easter Sunday. The faithful filled one of the churches in Colombo, which was bombed during attacks on Easter services 2 years ago, which left 290 people dead. In Jerusalem, people have gathered to commemorate Easter in person, in sharp contrast to last year, thanks to Israel's successful vaccination campaign, although most Palestinians in the West Bank are yet to receive a vaccine. Here in the UK, the Prime Minister said in his Easter message that it had been a very tough year. Boris Johnson acknowledged restrictions meant many would once again be unable to celebrate in the normal way, but said brighter days are to come. Sir Keir Starmer, meanwhile, used his Easter message to pay tribute to the Christian community for supporting others during the pandemic. The Labour leader said he was in awe of their efforts over the last 12 months and thanked them for their support. Now, if you're heading to church this morning, be careful to follow social distancing rules. Police in South London were filmed shutting down a Good Friday service and threatening worshippers with arrest. But the church has criticised the officers, saying it believes that all the rules were being met and has accused the police of brutally exceeding their powers. Sadia Chowdhury reports.
You are not allowed to meet inside with this many people under law.
Easter service halted by threats of £200 fines.
Failure to comply with this direction to leave and go to your home address ultimately could lead you to be fined £200, or if you fail to give your details, to you being arrested.
Police say those present were clearly not socially distanced. The worshippers quietly walked out. But as services resumed today, many said officers had taken a step too far.
Precautions were made, everyone was keeping distance, everyone had masks on.
I obviously felt very offended, as I would say this is the most important day of the year for us Christians.
I was so surprised why that happened and where is the right.
The church is located within the Archdiocese of Southwark, which today cited national guidance issued by the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales and said public worship is permissible where COVID hygiene procedures are in place. In a statement, the Metropolitan Police said officers were called to a report of crowds of people queuing outside a church in Balham High Road. Officers attended and found a large number of people inside the church. Some people were not wearing masks and those present were clearly not socially distanced. As such, officers made the decision that it was not safe for that particular service to continue. According to the latest guidance, there are no restrictions on how many people can gather for communal worship, as long as they can be safely accommodated.
I think it was a very shocking thing that they went in and stopped the service. It's good that the government take measures, and it's important because we must help people not to fall sick. But once it's been proved with evidence that religious services do not spread this virus if they're COVID secure, and that the government have allowed this, then the police shouldn't overstep the mark.
The church has accused police of brutally exceeding their powers. That's strongly disputed by officers who have the difficult job of enforcing regulations. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News in Southwark.
Happy Easter, everybody. How will you be spending yours? In the sunshine? Yes?
Yes, there will be some sunshine, and hopefully those Easter eggs won't melt in it, because it will be quite a warm day across southern areas with lots of dry and sunny weather. But in the north, it will eventually become colder with some wintry showers.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. There's lots of fine weather to be had today across many central and southern parts of the UK and Ireland, but from the north it is going to start turning cloudier with the rain spreading southwards. Then behind that, another front comes through with some wintry outbreaks and very strong northerly winds bringing through an Arctic airflow. So everywhere by Easter Monday is going to feel noticeably colder. It's a chilly start this morning, though, in fact, from clear skies from most places overnight. Therefore, it's a sunny start to the day, but it's frosty. There are areas of mist and fog. Less cold down towards southern and eastern parts of England, where we've seen more in the way of cloud, and also across the north and west of England and Wales. In fact, some patchy light rain and drizzle across the north of Scotland that will be moving its way southwards across Scotland. Ahead of it, it will become cloudier this afternoon across parts of Northern Ireland, the north of the Republic, later northwest England. So the sunshine turning hazy across these parts, and there will be limited amounts of brightness by the end of the day. And then from the north of Scotland, there will be northerly winds developing, becoming quite strong with wintry showers. But for most of Ireland, England and Wales, sunny and warm.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. The government has set out plans for COVID passports, with pilots due to begin in under 2 weeks' time. A nightclub in Liverpool and the FA Cup semi-final at Wembley are amongst the first to get the go-ahead. The Prime Minister has also announced a traffic light system for international travel in a bid to restart foreign holidays. Who are heading to green light destinations will not require quarantine. Police and politicians in Northern Ireland have appealed for calm following a second night of violence around Belfast. The trial of Derek Chauvin, the police officer accused of killing George Floyd in Minneapolis last year. As we're saying, the trial of Derek Chauvin, the police officer accused of killing George Floyd in Minneapolis last year, is set to continue next week. Powerful witness testimonies have made a compelling start to a trial that could define America's future. Attorney and legal analyst Anne Bremner joins us now from Seattle. Good morning to you. What have you made of proceedings thus far?
Well, it's been quite a week. Sorry, I was just putting in some earphones. The prosecution's had a very strong week. They started, of course, with a dispatcher that thought that things looked troubling to her, and she actually called a supervisor, called a sergeant, to say that she didn't feel things were right, which sounds like she'd never done before. And she said, I don't want to sound like a snitch. That's what they started with the week. They had all the civilian witnesses that were very traumatized by not being able to help George Floyd when they tried to. And they tried to intervene. And Donald Williams, who had martial arts training, said this was a blood choke, basically choking somebody so their blood wouldn't go through their neck. He knew about this kind of a hold that he tried to intervene and say that this shouldn't be happening. There was a 17-year-old with her 9-year-old cousin, that her name was Darnella. We didn't get a last name because she was a juvenile at the time, who filmed all of this. And her video is the one that went viral around the world of Derek Chauvin, basically having his knee on George Floyd's neck. And then, of course, we heard from medics that said he was essentially dead when they got there. And then at the very end, they had a very strong witness, Lieutenant Zimmerman, who said that the use of force was totally excessive, totally inappropriate. And that was a very strong opinion coming from someone that works in homicide and has been in the force for 35 years.
Yes, that strong opinion saying totally unnecessary. And the 17-year-old that filmed the entire incident spoke of the guilt that she felt at perhaps not doing more.
Yeah, and then she said that she would wake up at night, you know, thinking about what she could have done. I mean, it's something that's really troubled her. And she talked a lot about, you know, her own family and about this could be a father, you know, an uncle, etc. So you hear, you know, these people were out there seeing something unfold before them where they couldn't help. And when they tried to help, we heard from Genevieve Hansen, remember the firefighter, she tried to help. She said that I can come in. I have certain skills, of course. She could help medically. And she was rebuffed. And she was very angry on the stand. So you had a lot of regret. You had a lot of anger. You had a lot of fear. And people thinking all of them wanted to help him. And they think if only I could have helped him, he would have lived.
We also heard from Donald Williams, the passerby, who was quite vocal in his evidence. And he actually argued with the officers.
Yes, he argued with the officers, and he admitted using some names. And every time the defense attorney confronted him with a certain name that he used, he said, "Yeah, I said that." And then again, he said, "Yeah, I said that," because he was very angry, and he was saying he can't breathe. He's not breathing. You know, he can't breathe, and they were just ignoring him. So he just got more and more angry. But, you know, on the stand, he wouldn't say that he was angry. He basically said that he was just trying to help.
How has this been playing out in the state? So what's the mood out there?
Well, it's, you know, it's a huge case, and it's playing out in every city. We've had protests, you know, ever since this happened. And it's been a year ago as of May. People are glued to streaming footage of the trial, glued to TV coverage. Everybody's talking about it. People have opinions about it. You know, some people are saying that, you know, he'll never get a fair trial, this officer. But I think most people are saying, we saw the video. We all know what happened. And it wasn't just 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Now it was 9 minutes and some 23 seconds or more. And we even have their own department, the Minneapolis Police Department, one of the most senior ranking lieutenants in the department, saying that this wasn't right. And that when somebody is prone and handcuffed and is not resisting, and in fact doesn't appear to be moving, then that's not a time to use force.
And Bremner, thank you very much for sharing your legal expertise with us.
Thank you.
The case continues. Time now for a look at the weather. Here's Naz.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. So far this Easter weekend, it has been fine for many areas, but we are going to start seeing a change from the north by the end of today as a cold front sweeps its way southwards across Scotland, and overnight and tomorrow clearing, but northerly winds bringing through cold Arctic airflow. So it will be cold for everywhere on Easter Monday with wintry hazards. Until then, lots of sunshine out there this morning, but it's a chilly start, frosty too, with some isolated fog patches. Less cold down towards the south and east where it's cloudy, and also across the north and west, not as cold as yesterday morning. Going into this afternoon, and the cloud will actually peel back across parts of eastern and southeastern England, where it has been rather cloudy and cool recently. So some warm and bright spells there. In fact, lots of sunshine for most of England, Wales and Ireland this afternoon, and dry weather too. But somewhat cloudier across Scotland and later over Northern Ireland, the north of the Republic and northwest England, with rain spreading southwards there, then later wintry showers and strong winds in the north.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
With us now to take us through the newspapers, broadcaster and journalist Afia Dom and editor of Challenges Northern Ireland, Thomas Copeland. Welcome back to both of you. Starting with the Times front page, Thomas, you've had a look at this story, and this is the very worrying stat that 200,000 children will move from primary to secondary schools without being able to read properly because of lack of time in school during the pandemic.
That's right. This is unpublished government figures that have been released to the Sunday Times this morning. A grand total, 840 million school days lost. That's around 19 weeks per pupil. That's on average how much each student at that age has lost in terms of schooling this year. Now, the illiteracy figures is a rise of 30,000, leaving around 200,000 students moving from primary into secondary with inhibitions in terms of their ability to read and write. Now, I mean, there's another conversation really to have about why it is that 150,000 under normal circumstances are moving from primary into secondary with some level of illiteracy. But it's undoubted that the pandemic has rapidly expanded the number of students who are suffering in this way. It's clear that, this is a fundamental period of your life that, the last couple of years of primary in particular moving into secondary. And it would not surprise me at all if that cohort of students from that age group, unless there's fairly significant support from the government intervention over the next number of years, if that is a cohort that is recognisable in the future on account of the fact that they've lost that very fundamental part of their learning at a young age. So the Times today is outlining some of what the government's intending to do, things like they've appointed a catch-up education SAR, talking about extending some of the terms, cutting away some of the holidays. Yet another Dad's Army style surge in order to try to recruit some retired teachers who I'm sure will be thrilled to come back into the teaching industry right now. The thing that concerns me, I suppose, is that this has got to be more than just spellings and grammar. So much of what kids at that age are missing out on is that interaction with other students. It's about socialising, it's about messing about, it's about learning from each other. That's fundamental to the education process. And if this kind of education catch-up programme is just focused on learning your spellings, learning your ABC, reciting off your times tables, then I don't think that's going to adequately catch up on the kind of experience that these students have lost out on over the last year.
Yeah, well, let's hope they will be able to sort of claw it back and actually make up for the extra lessons. And you can't make up for the time missed with your friends, but, hopefully you'll be able to meet up in the future. Let's move on to The Guardian. And this story is about the race commission that the government published this week. It's had much criticism, but the Guardian's actually pointing to some other elements that are little known about the actual report.
Absolutely, Gillian. So, as you said, this was the report by the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities that was published this week. And like you said, it's been very controversial and widely criticised. And one of the recommendations that Tony Sewell wanted to have in the report that didn't make it, so this is something that didn't go into the report and hasn't come to fruition, is that he wanted to teach a new subject in schools, and he wanted to teach children the truth about modern Britain. He also wanted to have a textbook produced that would have been rolled out to schools, and this was kind of based on a Russian model, something that they've done in Russia to teach the history of Russia. Now, this has hit a nerve because, as we know, this report has been widely condemned by experts in health, in education, in race, in economics, who have said that the report saying that institutional racism doesn't exist, that is fundamentally wrong. And the concern would be that if there had been a textbook printed, then some of the things that are written in the report that have been widely disputed would have made their way into that textbook. Now, like I said, this isn't a recommendation that came to fruition. This textbook would not be produced, and actually the report includes a clear recommendation for the Department of Education to work with an independent panel to produce high quality teaching resources to tell the multiple and nuanced stories of the contribution of people from different ethnic minorities today. So the Guardian have written quite a lot about the report that came out from the Commission of Racial Disparities over the past week. So another story for them. Like I said, Tony Sewell wanted to have this new subject to teach modern day Britain in schools. But like I said, this is something that didn't make it into the report. And I think people will be quite glad about that.
Interesting. The Sun, Thomas, this is about the raid on a church by the police because they weren't practising social distancing rules.
That's right. This is a story that went viral online over the weekend. The video shows a Good Friday service taking place in the south of London. 2 police officers walk right up to the altar. You can see a little bit of a picture of it there. Turn around and tell the assembled congregation they need to head home. They aren't abiding by the coronavirus regulations. Now, as you'd expect, the church say, yes, we were. We had face masks on. We were 2 meters apart. The police say, no, you weren't. There were all sorts of regulations that you weren't abiding by. A lot of anger, has been directed at the police over the last couple of days, which I think is kind of 50% the wrong approach in this. I feel at this stage there's a huge amount of coronavirus restriction fatigue. The pretense that a lot of us had that we fully understand the rules seem to have dropped. I mean, I'm an above average consumer of news. I watch Sky News and follow the fantastic coverage on here. And I would tell you that I right now couldn't accurately tell you what all the rules and regulations are, whether it's the rule of 6, is it a rule of 10, 2 people, 1 garden. The kind of mental discipline that we had at the start of this pandemic in terms of understanding what the rules are and how they apply seems to have disappeared somewhat. The problem I find, there's an incoherence ever so slightly bleeding into, yes, you can see an image of it there, bleeding into the law. And for that, look to the politicians. I mean, I've seen images of MPs out protesting this new police bill, despite the fact that they voted for the restrictions that banned protests under the coronavirus guidelines. So coming out of this pandemic, I think what we need to make sure is that we get a better grip on exactly how these regulations work, make sure that we understand them fully. I think there's probably been a problem in Parliament over the last number of months of just voting things through.
People definitely need to make sure they understand the rules. Just very quickly, staying with the Easter theme, but we are running out of eggs. There's an Easter egg shortage, Mafia. This is in The Guardian.
Yes, this is from The Guardian. So you've got people posting stories and pictures on social media that they aren't able to find Easter eggs in shops. So, of course, we know we had shortages of toilet roll and eggs last Easter. And this year it is Easter eggs. So some people going to 10 stores and still not being able to find their supply of Easter eggs.
I'll take that as the excuse as to why I haven't got an egg from either of you.